First of all, we are waiting to see what the US response is. It's been lukewarm so far.
It has been, Laura. Thanks for having me. My guess is it's going to be a long night in D.C., along with most European capitals and as well. You were right. This is unwarranted. It's unprovoked. Scott Morris is spot on that, but it's still going to happen. You can sort of see the now starting to play out. As Putin recognized those separatist republics earlier today, the die was cast as to what was going to happen next. We're hearing now in just the last half hour that there may have been Russian troops that have already moved into those separatist regions. Again, it's going to be dicey information for the next 24 hours or so, but a great deal of activity going on. Yes, I think the United States was quiet, certainly not as quiet as, say, some of the European countries, including the Germans, over the course of the last couple of months. Some serious considerations here as to whether or not it's too late now for preemptive sanctions. But certainly you have to imagine that the White House is going through its entire playbook on what it can do today to try and, or tonight, to try and punish the Russians as quickly as possible.
And Mr. Mulvaney, might this just expose America and the West, because sanctions aren't going to work as well with Russia as they do with other nations, and then we are left with not many weapons in the arsenal, are we?
Yeah, well, in fact, I think what you're seeing is in part a reaction to the weak response of the West to Crimea 8 years ago. We beat our chest, we huffed, we puffed, we put on some sanctions, but at the end of the day, could you blame the Russians for looking their hand over and saying, we got Crimea and didn't pay that high of a price? The West is not going to do that much if we take certainly eastern Ukraine, so why don't we go ahead and do it? Again, the Russians are, they're self-interested, right? If they thought there would be a significant cost to doing what they do, they wouldn't be doing it. But they've obviously gone through the calculations to determine that it's in their best interest to do this. Yeah, I think the West is paying a price for being soft on Crimea in the past in terms of sanctions, and certainly we did not do preemptive sanctions the way that some of us had talked about doing here in the U.S. over the last couple of weeks. So, yeah, this is the real world, and there are real implications to action and inaction.
Could this be Biden's Obama moment? I think we all remember when Barack Obama said there was a red line in Syria. When that red line was reached, he didn't move.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And he gave a speech earlier this week. It was an unusual speech. It was done in the middle of the day, which is rare for a presidential address. But it was the first time that I remember President Biden saying that he would not commit U.S. troops, servicemen and women, to the Ukraine. Again, I think that's the right decision. But what it essentially leaves you with is nothing but economic sanctions, which I'm okay with. But you can't say you're not going to send troops, you're going to focus on sanctions, and then not do it. So your point is well made. You can't say this is a red line either economically or militarily and then not back that up at all. So again, like I said, the next 24, 48 hours are going to be critical around many of the world's capitals this evening.
Yeah, indeed. And as I mentioned, it's after 1 o'clock in the morning in Kiev, and it's getting late in Washington, D.C. as well. So it will be a long night. The question for us down under as well, Mick Mulvaney, is what does China do? We know around the Winter Olympics there has been a closer relationship between Russia and China. They didn't do it quietly. They signed a new accord. And China will be looking very closely at how the West responds here.
Yeah, it's a discussion that's actually getting some traction here in Washington in the last couple of days, made the news this evening. Where is China on this particular issue? Why is China not stepping up and assuming a role that we assume that it wants to take amongst the leading nations of the world and speaking out against what Russia is doing? Why are they sitting back, almost tacitly approving what the Russians are doing? Should it send a message to the rest of the world about the type of actor that China is? Yes, you and I have talked on this show before about the lessons learned about China from the early days of COVID. There are more lessons to be learned about China here as we look at the Ukraine. So, yeah, I think it's right to ask where China is. My guess is, part of the White House this evening is on the phone with European leaders. Another portion of them is trying to figure out where the Chinese are. Where are the Saudis on this? The Saudis have indicated in the last week or so that they're going to maintain their agreements with Russia regarding oil production. That's something that really shouldn't be acceptable. And you can imagine that the Americans and our allies are on the phone with the Saudis as well to get them to try and distance themselves from the Russians.